Spring is calling, weddings, patio sessions, barbecues, and you want that drink vibe without sacrificing tomorrow. That's RK Zero Proof. As the world's first zero proof spirits brand, RK created the warm molecule, giving you the smooth kick of whiskey or tequila with zero alcohol, 0 calories, 0 sugar, and all the peace of mind you need to enjoy every moment. Step into the zero proof season at rkzeroproof.com.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Welcome to the Irish NFL Show in association with QuinBet and proudly hosted on the Believe Network. As we record on this, well, it was sunny Easter Monday evening, but we're just over 3 weeks out now from the 2026 draft. We've been assembling the needs of each team, division by division. Check out those of your favorite team or division on YouTube or on your podcast platform of choice. It's now the turn of the NFC West. Ciaran Boyle, Shane Brennan and Brian O'Leary with me, Conor Brophy, to break it down, starting with the Broncos, who have 7 picks, Ciaran Boyle, in this year's draft. None in the first round because of that move that they just recently made to take Jalen Waddle from the Miami Dolphins. The Broncos are one of the more interesting teams entering this season. They did very little in free agency, bar that blockbuster move for Jalen Waddle, which, fair enough, was exactly the right move, or seems to have been. They have the most settled team heading into the 2026-27 season. They return more starters than any other team. The only departures, Drake Greenlaw, didn't really work out after he joined from the 49ers, and Jonathan Franklin Myers, who's gone. So that suggests they'll be looking defense when they eventually get to pick, which will be the 62nd overall pick in the second round.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, that defense was, they were number 1, number 2 in pretty much every stat. I think they were number 2 in total defense and number 1 in red zone in red zone defense. So, we all know the story of that defense from last year. I'd probably be looking a little bit more towards the offensive side of the ball. There were plenty of games last year where they just score. We had the incident with Mims and Sutton not getting the ball as much as they probably would have liked. So I'm probably leaning a bit more towards wide receiver or tight end in this draft. I know we have the other problem that I think it was the Saints who had not the Saints, who had the 48th pick. Who did we just do earlier on in the NFC South? Falcons. There we go. Again, you're missing out on the top, quote unquote, top tier players, but there's still a lot of quality talent to be had at that position. But they got to have more offensive weapons for me. The run game struggled. They missed J.K. Dobbins for a huge part of the season. I think he missed 9 games. A lot of pressure, a lot of the attention and pressure went on to Harvey. Yes, he stood up and he had 12 touchdowns, but Jaleel McLaughlin only had the 1. So I think you're probably looking at solidifying either the running back room or giving Sutton and Mims a little bit more help. I think, they did re-sign a whole bunch of players like J.K. Dobbins, Singleton, Sternad, little Jordan Humphrey, who Giants fans will know. But, I think that the Waddle pickup is definitely going to help them in that regard. But I think they're going to need a little bit more. We saw how much the offense struggled. Yes, it was the snow, but kind of down towards the end of the season, they definitely struggled to put up, points in any meaningful way. We all remember that Jets game where it was just, field goal after field goal. So I think, somebody like Peyton is definitely going to be looking at adding some pieces to that. I don't want to say the defense is taken care of already, due to all the stats and all the work that they did last year, because, it's a brand new season coming up. But I have to think that, Surtain Jr., if he goes down for any length of time, they're going to need some help for him too. So conscious of the weapons they're going to need on offense, you also got to be conscious not to get kind of complacent on what you have already. And it's easy to rely on Surtain Jr., but people like I mentioned already, Avion Terrell out of Clemson, a nice cornerback, Brendan Cisse out of South Carolina. These are probably people that are going to be available in that kind of lower end of the second round. But I think between being light on offense and needing those defensive pieces just to keep the boat or to keep the ship afloat, I think they're going to have to look at those two aspects. Got to remember, 14-3. They started off pretty shaky, but they finished strong. They were able to eke out wins, and it was that defense, that ruggedness on defense, that got them those wins. So they can't get complacent and just think that that's going to happen again in 26. So add some nice pieces there. Add a couple of pieces on the offense, on the wide receiver part, maybe tight end, and let's see what works for them this year.
It was a very quiet offseason, as I was saying, Shane, for the Broncos, and then suddenly it wasn't. Jalen Waddle's in the door, and then there's this crazy rumor linking them with Aaron Rodgers, of all things. When you think Sean Payton this time last year talking up this team as one of the most championship-ready teams he's ever been able to coach, and they were almost good for his word, getting as far as the AFC Championship game before losing to your Patriots. But if you're standing still in the NFL, you're going backwards.
And that's the thing. I on the AV Club over the course of the season, I often sat back and I was just aghast at how the Denver Broncos kept doing so well. And it's nice to see that they're keeping the band together. The fraud squad hasn't left Mile High City. They're staying strong and staying forward into what they're building. And this is the thing. Like, the offense, I think, needs to make, and Ciaran has been on the money here. The offense in Denver needs to make bigger strides in order to control games and not always rely on these come from behind, fourth quarter, out of nowhere, mistakes are made by the opposition type victories, which basically carried them through October and November last year. That's what happened with the Denver Broncos. And there's two kind of nice ideas. Firstly, how about you get a backup quarterback so we're not all steadying up every time in case Bo Nix goes down with an injury again. It would have been nice if somebody who was more tested or more fresh would have been able to go into that AFC Championship game. But I know backup quarterback is always the thing. But I could see the rationale behind maybe an Aaron Rodgers move in that respect. But the running game as well. We were talking about the fact that yes, injuries came about. Changed there as well. But the offensive line wasn't fantastic in terms of how it actually ran the run game. And the Broncos historically don't use much draft capital on offensive line. They either spend or find some way to trade it in. They're not a draft offensive line team. I think that might need to change. But yeah, I think offense. What you're saying there is right. If you stand still, you move behind. I think these Broncos team, if they don't make any huge change, look, that Jalen Waddle trade is huge. It means they don't have any first-round capital to work with this year, and I think next year as well. But I think he is a great player to fit into that system, somebody that Knicks can work with, somebody that the team can scheme with excellently, and he will make a big difference. But if you're not being aggressive and trying to find new ways to control games, then all those close wins, all those come from behind victories, the teams you're facing against collapsing. You have to remember, by virtue of the fact that they won the division, their schedule is tougher this year, which is going to make it more tricky. I think the Chiefs are going to come back with fire. The Raiders aren't going to be as easy to beat as they were last year, and they played some pretty dire games against the Raiders last year. And the Chargers are going to be difficult as well. They need more, and they don't really have the draft capital to push for a tight end, which they really need, a pass catching tight end, for a linebacker, which they could really do with. So it'll be interesting to see whether they try to supplement that in free agency. So yeah, I think fundamentally a tight end I think would be a nice pick for this Denver team to try and get somebody where, again, it's an extra option. It might leave Waddle and some of the other receivers more free if they have multiple guys for people to defend, and just give Bo Nix more control of his offense and let the run game be forward. I think using some draft capital on offensive line further down would be useful in terms of building depth. But we saw this like with the Vikings a couple of years ago when they had so many of these close wins, and the following season they just completely fell off the radar when it comes to the playoff conversation. The Broncos could be in that bracket. Some people are sitting back and saying, "Oh, Broncos, Super Bowl bound, lads." I don't see it at the moment, and I need to see that they're using their draft capital in more sort of distinctive ways in terms of properly fitting the thing, because I just think that there's too much the same here, and they're not addressing the run game issue. And yes, they've addressed greater pass game talent, but they need to balance that with an offensive line that I think gives greater balance to the Denver Broncos, so they can control the game from start to finish, which is, frankly, they didn't do last year. As much as they built into the season, had a good record, they need to be more dominant this year.
There are quite wildly contrasting views on the Broncos, Brian. As Shane's outlined it there, people are saying, yep, Broncos country, let's ride all the way to the Super Bowl. If it wasn't for the Bo Nix injury and the accursed bit of snow in Mile High, they would have made the Super Bowl, where they would have been beaten badly by the Seahawks. But let's forget about that. The bookies have them as third in the division. Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers joint favorites. Broncos third. So by the bookies, the Broncos are unlikely to even make the playoffs next year, which seems like a dramatic fall from grace, to be fair, for a team that returns most of the players that got them to the brink of the Super Bowl last year.
I think it falls into a narrative that Shane's alluding, that people still just don't believe in this Broncos team despite the successful season they had. Shane is very much on the Easter hunt, isn't he, Conor? I mean, he's after the Broncos already, and it's only April, suggesting they need a backup, and Aaron Rodgers is the man to come in and back up Bo Nix. 17 of 21 players that potentially could have walked out the door were re-signed coming in to that free agency period. You're right, they didn't do much in free agency, but all signs point to this team and this ownership and the organization and George Payton thinking we were a snow game away from essentially being in the Super Bowl, so why can't we not go back to back and put ourselves back in this position? I do agree with Jane, and I discussed it even with Colin. He's a big Broncos fan, former host of the show, that I was surprised they didn't try go after running back in free agency. If they weren't going to do much, I felt it was free agency. Sean Payton alluded to one thing in particular after that AFC Championship game, Conor, which was he greatly underestimated how much they didn't run the ball. He thought they would have a really stellar game, and we all could see that they didn't have a really strong running game there. And maybe that's what I was
thinking. Shane mentioned Jarrett Stidham earlier. Like, Jarrett Stidham reminds me of, remember Andy Reid, not the Kansas City Chiefs Andy Reid, but Andy Reid, the former Republic of Ireland soccer player. And there's this whole cause celeb when he wasn't being picked, and Andy Reid became Johan Cruyff all of a sudden. Like, people talking about what an amazing player he was. Every game that Ireland played was like, oh, if only Andy Reid was playing. Like, Jarrett Stidham played a couple of nice preseason games, had a couple of nice filling games with the Patriots, and then basically didn't play for about 4 years. And his legend grew and grew and grew and grew and grew until you realize, oh, actually, he's not all that good at all.
Well, his legend grew that particular week because the Broncos fans were trying to trust their head coach, who came out after the immediate reaction after the Bills game when he did the press conference, and straight away he went out on the front foot saying Stiddy's ready for this. He's been waiting for this opportunity, and all week it all built up. And even initially during the fourth quarter, it looked like, okay, maybe they're right, and then we quickly saw that they couldn't do anything with the ball. I'll go back to what Ciaran said as well. I know you're suggesting defense as well, Conor, but Kieran's made a point there. If this defense is the same defense which we saw last year, by and large, they should have a successful season. Their tight end room combined for 3 touchdowns last year. That's just not good enough for a team that's trying to challenge to go to the Super Bowl. I'll throw out a name. Eli Storrs is the one that keeps getting touted as a potential candidate in the second round for the Broncos. But I think, and again, to what Shane said, they need to give options. They were restricted last year, but as well as Bo Nix played, Courtland Sutton numbers didn't jump off the charts. Franklin was hit and miss at times, played well in the playoffs. They brought in Jalen Waddle because they probably looked at it and said, are we going to get a wide receiver late in the first round that could come in and have an immediate impact with the likes of Jalen Waddle do? I'm not as negative as people are. I think they're very much in the mix to run it back and win this division again, because I'm not entirely sure what the Chiefs and the Chargers for me just tend to be up and down, Jekyll and Hyde teams. So I think they're well ready to go again, but I'm still not convinced they'll be Super Bowl SoFi next year, but they'll be challenging again. Interesting to see what they do in the coming weeks.
Well, let us talk about the Chargers then, Brian, because they only have 5 picks in the draft. The NFL mock draft database consensus first round pick for them is Caleb Banks, D lineman out of Florida Gator. I'm not so sure about that. You would think that based on what happened to them last year, that the Chargers would be looking interior O-line.
Yeah, and like Trevor Penning came across from the Saints, a guy who was former guest of the show, and the Saints were quickly to move off him. He's getting another contract, but he didn't really hasn't lived up to the potential. We saw time and time again, like Justin Herbert's played with a broken arm essentially for a period of the season. His left arm was broken, and that's what all the struggles of the offensive line. He had very little support. Even the playoff game against the Patriots, like we spoke time and time again about the fact the Patriots defense did a lot to get them to the Super Bowl, but he had no time in that game whatsoever. And like, he had a very good season, but he was playing with a banged up offensive line, players missing, and they struggled. And if you look at the other interior, like I think they need an edge rusher. So it's going to be a tricky one to see what way to go, because I think they're starting with a really proper edge rusher. I know Cleveland Mack is coming back, but he's at the back end of his career. Bose has moved on. I think there's a gap there. But yeah, I would agree. Like Justin Herbert is the man to bring this team forward, isn't he? And like without an offensive line, and like if they have a strong run game with the rookie running back going to a second season, they need to give him better support as well in terms of the lanes. I go offensive line as well. Yeah.
Shane, I remember well when we were looking at the playoff game in our live watch along last year, and you said the only team that the Patriots could beat in the playoffs would be if they were lucky enough to get the Chargers, and that wasn't the only team they beat in the playoffs, to be fair, but it happened just like you called it, where the Chargers offensive line / turnstile just wasn't able to hold up to what the Patriots were able to muster on a pass rush that up until that point of the season had been a bit meh, and then outperformed in the playoffs to get them to the Super Bowl. But losing Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater torpedoed the Chargers season. They got to protect Justin Herbert. They just got to do more in a lot of areas for a team that you could squint every season and fool yourself into thinking that this is going to be the Chargers' year. If it is going to be their year, they really do need a good draft.
Yeah, and just to follow on what we were talking about earlier, I mean, you talk about offensive line and the Chargers. But what do we talk about? And this is one of the reasons why I was confident for the Patriots coming into that game is the Chargers with Joe Alt and the Chargers without Joe Alt. And you know, as great as Joe Alt is, it's not good enough for the team to be so reliant on one player. I mean, the Chargers is in such desperate need for good guards. I think they're looking in Temple more just to try and see if they can find someone to bring in. Right guard, left guard. I know, like Brian to alluding to earlier, they brought in Cole Strange. That's why I think that it is strange that a lot of mock drafts have them going on defense. As much as, you know, the defensive front line could do a better pass rush, just look at the stats on the offensive line last year. They're somewhere between 30th and 32nd, depending on who you ask. The fact that Justin Herbert in that playoff game got absolutely no traction because the Patriots were just able to just plow through it and keep getting to him and getting to him and getting to him. They can't get the run game going either, which wasn't a great start. So look, I think this is...
I mean, if you're the Chargers, what this team is screaming out to me is, Ciaran Boyle says it all the time, it's a copycat league. They're looking at what the Patriots did last year. They're looking at what the Bears did last year. Rebuild your O-line, transform your offense. They brought in Mike McDaniel, who, as we know, is a very creative offensive coach. Whatever about how his head coaching stint went in Miami, I don't think anyone underestimates what this guy can do with the talent that the Chargers do have available to them on offense, provided that they can block.
And this is the great thing about the Chargers with McDaniel in there. McDaniel is a really, really good schemer for the run game. I know he was a run game coordinator in Atlanta, I think, before he moved up. Moved up the chain, but we saw that as well with Achane. If he's given the right offensive lineman, if he's given the right space to do it, it didn't always complement because, you know, it's almost like they focus too much on quarterback play because they spent money on getting in Hill and Tua. It's a different situation in LA where they can, I think, focus more on trying to give, you know, Hampton the ball, and yes, to have Lad McConkey to use there in the pass game, but the run game is going to be key. And for that, you need a strong offensive line. You need an offensive line that knows the scheme, that you can coach well. And I think if you do that, I mean, you're referring to the Bears there. The Bears go from having one of a pretty poor offensive line in 2024 to having the third best last year. Joe Thuney, of course, being the keystone to that, but it wasn't just him. It was all across. It was the focus of coaching. It was the focus of philosophy. It was the focus of draft, and you turn yourself into a team that, you know, that now people have a lot more confidence in terms of Super Bowl runs. And the Chargers are that kind of move away. I know the copycat league point is fair, but it's a very, very clear path for the Chargers now. You could argue that maybe using all draft capital and guards means that you're going to end up with a lot of inexperience, and you could do with more sort of veteran muscle being put into the O-line. Again, they probably haven't satisfied that need in the way that they should have done. I know Tyler Badaj as in the center was a big acquisition, but yeah, I think it's fairly simple. Like if they don't have any offensive line, forget about the run game and the pass game, because they're good on skill position. They're well coached defense. I think they've got enough skilled defensive players to at least keep them afloat as an above average defense. You know, it's offensive line or bust for me for LA.
Where do you think they're going to go, Ciaran?
Can you draft identity Is that available in the draft this year? Because what do the fraudsters lack? The fraudsters lack an identity. I mean, the main gripe that I have with the Chargers is, what's the calling card? I mean, they're not overly physical. They've got a nice defense. They were, fifth in total defense, top 10 in red zone and rushing defense. What's their identity on offense? I mean, they got Justin Herbert, who looks good, but he was hamstrung or Armstrong for most of 25. I mean, the issue with the Chargers is they need to figure out who they are first, because I don't think the Chargers have that gravitas in the league just yet. They don't have the mystique of Lambeau. They don't have the mystique of Soldier Field, or they
don't have any fans.
Well, that's where I'm leading to. I mean, they don't. I mean, you look at franchises around the league that are storied and that have built success. The Chargers, I mean, their stadium is a destination stadium. I mean, it really is. They try to import and have fake fans in the stadium. They need to find that identity and figure out what they are. Are they smash mouth defense, or are they going to be fancy football? They're going to be Harbaugh slinging the rock, because they need to figure that out real quick, because they're going to get left behind in 26 if they don't figure it out soon. I've got a lot of concerns about them in general, but pinpointing a couple of spots. Hampton is a nice running back, but he needs help. I mean, he had 9 games, 545 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he's going to need help if you're going to build around him. Kamani Vidal ain't it. I'm sorry. It's 2026 now. The defense is handy. It's serviceable, but again, you need to add some spots to that. They got some nice pieces with Perryman. Khalil Mack might be on the downslide. Tarheeb still is real nice too. We saw Cam Hart in San Francisco. A couple other things. They have a boatload. They got Titans level of cap space on 110 million. So let's see what happens when the draft after all the dust is settled in Pittsburgh, and see what if they decide to cash out on some of that money they have. And the other thing is, with only 5 picks and the 22nd pick, are they going to get rid of that or offer that pick up and move back a little bit and give that up for a few more in the second round or even the third round? Because 5 picks in this draft is not a lot to address a lot of the glaring needs that the Chargers have, in my opinion. We've all talked about the issues with the O-line, but for me, it's more of the skill players. I mean, I think they're going to need help at wide receiver. I think they're going to need help at running back too. Tight end, again, is Sadiq going to be there? Is Stowers going to be there at 22 possibly? But I think for me, the Chargers need to draft some huevos. I think they really do. I think they got to figure out, are they just going to be one of those also-rans in the AFC West? Or are they going to put their, because Harbaugh, we all know the type of personality Harbaugh is. He just hasn't attached or been able to attach his personality, his intensity, his headbutting of Herbert before the game. He hasn't been able to translate that to the rest of the team. And the team needs to catch up to that and kind of instill into them some of Harbaugh's intensity, because until that happens, for me, it's still going to be a Broncos and Chiefs led division.
Sorry for the lack of a trigger warning on the word huevos there, Brian. Brian is now allergic to eggs after consuming an abundance of omelets in Super Bowl week last year.
We all did. Can I make a quick comment on the run game? Sorry for the Chargers, Conor. I know the guys spoke about it there very well, but when you think back to when Jim Harbaugh took the job and everybody said, he's going to run the ball down the throat, and you had J.K. Dobbins, who had a really strong season. And I thought it was a bad move for him not to bring him back last year. I know he had his injury problems in Denver, but he went to the Broncos. Initially, he had a really strong start to the season. They kind of tried to move in a different direction. They draft Hampton. They bring in Najee Harris. They got a great spit out of Vidal, in fairness, but that hasn't really worked at the level in which he probably thought last year. I thought he probably thought we're going to be a very run-oriented team. Injuries were a concern. Hampton went missing. Najee Harris got injured. Vidal was expected to do a lot of the workload. It didn't work out for them. I think if he's to get this team motoring offensively, take the pressure off Herbert, they're going to have a 3-headed monster back there. I'm not entirely sure where they're at in terms of who that's going to be in its entirety. In terms of the tour back, Najee Harris is already visiting other teams, so looks like he's not coming back. But that for me is where it needs to start. They need to get the run game really effective. Offensive line obviously is going to have to contribute towards that.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's not looking like the kind of offense that Mike McDaniel can work with and work his magic with without those pieces. We shall see what they do. Shane, you went to Kansas City last year to see the Chiefs up close and personal. They have 3 picks in the top 40 in this year's draft. They have them for a reason, because they underperformed last year by their own very lofty standards, and also because of the Trent McDuffie trade, which sees them with 2 first-round picks and then a high overall pick in round 2 as well. They're at number 40 overall in round 2. They do have a lot of areas to address. There's a high degree of confidence that they will do so. You're not alone in expecting the Chiefs to come roaring back this year. As we said, they're joint favourites to win the division and head straight back to the playoffs.
It's funny, you were mentioning my trip to Kansas City, World Cup host city, of course, as well. Interesting to see if Messi Mania. And I was actually just going through this Lamar Hunt book as I was flicking through it last night. And it was interesting to sort of like how so much of the philosophy of the club is about sort of like the sort of big long-term thinking. And that I think, and that wasn't always successful, particularly in a lot of time when Hunt was around. It's only really been recently they've been able to sort of really utilize sort of draft picks and grow up. And you look at what they've done in the offseason, look at the departures. I mean, so many of the players who are going out, it's in the defense. It seems like the defense is really being prized for a rebuild. And that's as much as I'm confident that the Chiefs are the betting favorites to win this division. They are my favorites to win this division even before the draft. I think the offense is going to come back and be one of the strongest units that Holmes had to work with in a while. And they still have Travis Kelce there, since they don't have to spend too much capital on trying to get a replacement tight end. It's the defense that is the biggest question mark for me in terms of many different areas. And the key to that is whether they'll be able to give somebody up to George Karlaftis who can bring pressure in, get sacks frequently, and just you stick with the Spags coaching model of just being adaptable and being versatile to the offensive line you're facing against, and just getting in those hits quick and often. I think the Chiefs are in a great position to do it. You mentioned there, of course, the fact they have great capital. The fact that picking at 9 is almost unusual. We're sitting back and talking with the Chiefs with a top 10 pick. Ruben Bain Jr. From the U has been sort of touted as the kind of player who would go in that position. Be interested to hear Kieran's take as to whether he was the right edge for that system. But that's kind of where they're trending here. It's getting the edge defenders. It's getting cornerbacks to replace your McDuffie, and then just a defensive tackle as well. It's that defense is in full rebuild mode. I think they're also talking about wide receiver. That maybe that's further down the draft. You could probably get somebody who's pretty coachable when you get down to that sort of 3rd, 4th round, that sort of tier 2 level. I can see the Chiefs maybe unearthing somebody who we're not talking about here, but because they're in the right place at the right time and coached with the right people, that we could be talking about next year as being, oh my God, this is one of the revelations of the draft. That's just the kind of player the Chiefs will find here, but I think they will go further down that. But yeah, I think look, the defense and the pieces that they're going to need on that to try and still be as formidable as possible, and to try and win situational football in the way that their offense will be still very good at situational football would be key. It'd just be interesting to know whether they decide to use all 3 of those sort of tier 1 picks in that, or whether they will mix it up and maybe use the picking later on in the first round as well as early in the second. 29th overall or 40th overall, whether they use that that second round pick on a receiver would be interesting to see. But yeah, it's defense all the way for me for Kansas City. They need to rebuild and put some new energy in that unit.
I can see them using that second round pick, Ciaran Boyle, on a receiver. I love the idea of KC Concepcion, KC going to KC. That could happen, and he's the kind of guy who would thrive in that system. You have to feel. But to Shane's point, the Chiefs have been asking the redoubtable Steve Spagnuolo to do miracles with it's a loaves and fishes exercise that he's had over the past couple of years. They need a completely rebuilt secondary. The capital that they've gotten for shipping Trent McDuffie to the Los Angeles Rams, you would think has to be deployed first and foremost on defense. They'll have an interesting choice to make at 9. A lot of players could be in the range there. They could be in the Mansour Delane. They could be in the Reuben Bain. They could even be in the Sonny Styles sweepstakes, depending on what goes on.
Yeah, and I have to think that the fact that they let Watson and Brian Cook and McDuffie go, I think a lot of that's got to do with the talent that's in the draft this year. I mean, obviously you look at contracts down the line and the old Parcells adage of or a Belichick adage of getting rid of players a year early instead of a year late. So I definitely think that was a factor in there too. Yeah, I think you're right. I really do like Delane for the 9th pick. I mean, we saw with the Eagles. Again, what happened to them a couple of years ago in the playoffs when they got smoked by Tampa Bay? They went out and got Quinyon Mitchell, and then they took care of that secondary issue. And I think that's what the Chiefs are going to address first and foremost. I think Caleb Downs is going to be. I think he's going to drop to 9. I think a lot of teams are going to go heavy on the Reese Styles, Jeremiah Love train, and I think he's going to be there. I think Downs will be there. At least if it's not Downs, then it'll be Delane at 9. I think one of those two will be available. And I think that's where the Chiefs go. They're going to address those safety and corner issues. I know they did pick up Alohi Gilman, but that's probably a little bit of a stopgap right now. I think they're going to go heavy on corners and safeties in those first 3 picks that they have. So that's going to. The other thing is we talk about the wide receiver part. Again, we're looking at a wide receiver room that's looking very familiar for the Chiefs with Xavier Worthy, 5'11", Rashee Rice, 6 foot. Tyquan Thornton a little taller. They've got to get height in there. Can you imagine? Mahomes with a T. Higgins or somebody 6'4", 6'5", and the damage he could do. I mean, we talk about Chris Brazell out of Tennessee. That could be an option.
AJ Brown.
AJ Brown, yeah, or even KC Concepcion. So I mean, there's a lot of talent out there for wide receivers. I just think Mahomes they've done a disservice to Mahomes the last couple of years and given him slot receivers. Imagine a wide receiver 1 that he could just yoke it up to like an AJ Brown. I think that'd be a huge game changer for the Chiefs. So I'd be looking for them to add some height. The kid Boston as well, who's 6'6". I think there's definitely a chance for them to make some moves on wide receiver. But first and foremost, they've got to address the loss that they have on corner and safety, and I fully think they're going to do that. The other thing we talk about, and probably every other team in the league needs the same thing with the O-line. Josh Simmons surprisingly had a really good season last year, and I don't think a lot of people had that marked as being a possibility. So we know the issues that Chiefs going back to the Super Bowl in New Orleans that they had at left tackle with the Joe Thuney and all that issue they had. They found Simmons, and they were able to figure that out. And with Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith anchoring that O-line too, I think they've addressed that. But the big thing for me is the Chiefs have got to address the offensive problems they have. I mean, in the last 5 losses they had in the season, they scored 10, 13, 9, 13, and 12 points. I mean, that's very un-Chief-like. So I don't think that'll, and that was just, remember we talked about in November, December, that final nail going to the coffin. Well, if you can't bust 15 points in the game, then the nail will be going to that coffin. So I think they're definitely going to start looking at some offensive weapons to add around Mahomes. Obviously, getting the run game, getting Walker added to that run game is going to be a huge addition. It'll almost make that Mahomes and Walker that Sonic and Knuckles Part 2 or Mark 2 in KC and free Mahomes up to do a little razzle dazzle of his own. But the issue with offense has got to be addressed. I think it will be, and I think those safety issues and corner issues will be addressed. I mean, it's almost like they have 3 first-round picks. I mean, 3 in the first 40. That's what teams dream about. And finishing 1-8 is going to be a distant memory. I think the Chiefs are going to ride on back, and I think that's going to be a really strong 26 for the Chiefs.
For the guy who was talking about staking the Chiefs through the heart, burning them, and then sprinkling holy water on the ashes last year, you're willing them back into existence here. You want them back in the Super Bowl. Secretly, you love to see the Chiefs, and you love to see Mahomes.
It's not even that. I think the team is so loaded, and I think everywhere you look, between the head coach, the quarterback, the defensive coordinator, the tight end, everything is there. They just couldn't put all, like we talked about it at length last year. All the games that were winning by 1 or 2 points last year, they were losing by 5 or 6. It's just a production issue. I think they'll address it. They got a little bit of play in free agency too. They're not done with that either. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about the Chiefs in 26. But I think they're on the way back.
Brian, you get giddy by the idea that a team that's sitting with the kind of capital that the Chiefs have, because they've got so many options, might execute some kind of a trade. Dare I say that might be in their line at some point, depending on which way the draft board shakes out.
Oh, I love those trades on draft night, Conor. I love the idea of the Chiefs trading from 29 up to finding another stellar player, and then 2 years' time we're forgetting about that 1 year of Chiefs mismatch of a poor season. Conor, I'm actually going to go back to something that you said a couple of months back before I even talked. You said it's great to have a surprising season, and it's great to see teams who have poor season coming back and getting to the playoffs, until we get to the playoffs and we don't really get the games in which we desire come January on those cold nights in Dublin. Because people are delighted to see the back of the Chiefs, and I was opposed to that. I want to see Mahomes in the playoffs. I know he was injured. I take that situation, but it was more about their box office. The Chiefs bring, good or bad, whether you like them or love them or hate them, or dubious refereeing decisions, it brings excitement during the playoffs. The 9th pick, Conor, and Ciaran said they need to get a big, strong, tall wide receiver for Mahomes. But what happens if the scenario plays out where Tate doesn't go to the Browns at 6, or something untoward happens in the top 5 and it completely distorts the first selections, and they get to 9 and he's on the board, and they do need to do a lot with the defense? And it looks like that McDuffie trade is, as you said, is suggesting that they're rebuilding this team similar to the way they did with Tyreek Hill trade, except they're doing it on the defense. But what happens if Tate is there at 9? Is he too good a player not to take and give Mahomes another explosive weapon? And maybe they would see Mahomes and the offense come back to what we've seen a couple of years ago with those really expansive throws down the field to Tyreek Hill, as opposed to that kind of organic offense we've seen where they were mixing up all different players going to the playoffs. I do think at 29 they're in a striking position to try and move up to try and get someone else. You said they've got additional picks because of the Rams trade. If there's something there that they can go after, maybe they take Tate early and then they can go after that really stellar defense play by moving up the board. I think they're in a great position.
Exactly. Like, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, you talk about teams' windows. Like, you want to squeeze every Super Bowl opportunity out of the Mahomes window that you can. A player like that is never going to come around again. You do whatever it takes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are assuming that the Chiefs are not necessarily going to self-destruct, but they won't be back at the level in which they were 2 years ago, because Broncos have just won the division. We're talking about the Broncos potentially running it back. The Chargers will be thereabouts, and people are suggesting, well, maybe the Chiefs aren't there. Just they're favourites for a reason, but they're joint favourites for a reason, Conor, because people do believe that it's a one-off. Andy Reid will be stewing all off-season, and he'll find a way. And I just think with those 3 picks, they could be giving away that second-round pick, which is an early second, as Ciaran said, to get up the board. And then all of a sudden, you've got 2 marquee first-round players immediately contributing to a Chiefs team. I think they're a dangerous animal next year. They're 18-1 with Quinbet to win the Super Bowl. Conor, I think that's way overpriced.
The Raiders, Ciaran Boyle, we all know what they're going to do with the number 1 overall pick. They're going to draft Fernando Mendoza, the Indiana quarterback. Because of finishing bottom last and getting to pick first overall, we know that the Raiders have an awful lot of work to do. So it's more interesting really to talk about what they do with the rest of the 9 picks they have. It would have been more than that had they managed to execute the Max Crosby to the Ravens trade, would have given them a second pick in the first round. That's not the case now. They did a lot of work in free agency, but they need to now complement that with the right draft class. Every team needs to do that, we know, but more so the Raiders because of how much of a gap there was between them and contention last year.
Yeah, and they did a huge amount of work in free agency. They almost took care of their entire linebacker roster in free agency with Kwity Paye, Quay Walker, and Nakobe Dean. So they're, and obviously picking up Tyler Linderbaum. But they're looking at Mendoza. What can we do? They're, again, looking around the league, what happened last year with Cam Ward? He had a terrible O-line, and he got creased in nearly every play. He got injured in a game I was at Jacksonville, and that's the last thing they want to happen. So getting Linderbaum in there, as the anchor of that O-line, that's what they're looking for. They got Colton Miller, Powers Johnson at guard. They're probably going to need a tackle Whether they go for that with the first or the 36, we'll see. I don't think any tackle, not the first pick, I'm sorry, with the 36th, I don't think any of those top three tackles we've talked about in the last couple of weeks will be there. They're going to need an O-line for the struggles that Ashton Genty had. There's so many holes and there's so many issues with this Raiders team. Getting Kubiak in, that'll be a nice shake up to the room. But I mean, the main problem with this team is offense. I mean, putrid last year, just awful. They were last in total offense, last in rushing offense. They were 27th in red zone offense. So every stat you look at, it was just terrible. And the room, the wide receiver room was pretty terrible. The running back room, it was Genty, and that's about it. So their whole focus this year in 26 is keeping Mendoza upright and giving him weapons to throw to. So with the 36th pick, I mean, you have to think they're going tight end or wide receiver. I know I think they have 10 picks actually. I think they have a compensatory pick thrown in there as well. But I have to think that they're going to load up on some offensive weapons. Kubiak's going to want to, start strong. He doesn't want to start off, 1-4, 1-5, me playing catch up and worried about Mendoza's, output and production all season. But I mean, a wide receiver room like Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers is not cutting it in this league. I mean, it might cut it in the UFL, but it's not going to do it in the NFL. So I see a lot of work with those picks going in the fourth, fifth round, picking up some wide receivers. The other thing is Mendoza is coming into a situation where he balled his what off in college and won some games that he wasn't initially expected to win, but through pure force. And we've seen his post-game interviews. There were games that he won that by no right should have won the games. But I mean, he had a dominant unit in front of him. We talked about Cam Ward when he was at Miami. He had Maui Noah in front of him there too. But Ward came from a place where he had a dominant line in front of him, and so is Mendoza. So they're going to want to add some pieces to that too. They don't want to see a situation like Cam Ward where he's getting knocked from pillar to post like last year. So they're going to have to take care of him. That's their prize asset. They're going to have Tom Brady checking in on him every day, before each game, after each game, making sure he's good. So that's their prized possession. They're going to have to add those horses to keep him upright, but they're going to need weapons to throw to, or for him to throw to as well. So there's a huge amount of need there. Defense, I mean, is Crosby going to be there? Who knows? I mean, what's going to happen there? The linebackers, I'm amazed what they did with free agency, picking up those guys in free agency. That was a master stroke. I mean, in a couple of days, they were able to nail down the starting linebackers. But for me, it's all about, this draft is all about Mendoza, what they're going to add for him in wide receiver help, and what they're going to do in the line right for him. So Linderbaum is the first piece. I mean, they picked up Connor Hayward as well. They got obviously Kirk Cousins to kind of whisper things in his ear and keep him motivated and keep him on the straight and narrow in Sin City. Jalen Naylor's a nice little pickup too, but again, just to reiterate the point, it's all about Mendoza and what he's going to be able to do. They're not going to want a Cam Ward situation or any of those kind of rookie quarterbacks getting thrown to the Lions. This is the Raiders. They're going to want to, put their stamp back on. Again, remember, this is a team that hasn't won a playoff game since the 2002 AFC Championship game. 24 years of wasteland. They've been in some playoff games, but they haven't won one in 24 years. It's Sin City. It's lights, glamour. They're going to want to bring that back to the franchise. The Davis family is still ruling the roost there. They remember the good times, and they're going to want that back in Vegas.
Brian, Ciaran talked about Kirk Cousins whispering sweet things maybe in Fernando Mendoza's ear to help him settle in. Kirk Cousins had a great line when he came back into the Falcons lineup last year after, from his perspective, frustrating time sitting out. He said, sometimes you got to walk by faith and not by sight. That's what Fernando Mendoza is going to probably have to do next year. It's not all going to take shape necessarily in 1 year, but the Raiders are making a lot of moves, and I don't think it's all going to be around Mendoza either, is it? Because the Max Crosby situation is not insignificant in how it bears on what the Raiders, or how the Raiders are going to approach this draft. They have him now back. Do we know whether that's going to be permanent or not? We don't. But either way, it's not all going to be about the offensive side of the ball, because they're either going to have to replace Max Crosby or they can choose to further complement him.
Yeah, Conor, it's interesting when you're doing draft needs and you go into all the various websites and the certain teams it'll just exploit a couple of positions and say tight end, offensive line. And when I looked at the Raiders one today, it had offensive line, safety, linebacker, cornerback, wide receiver. So then you're thinking, they just take best player available every time they hit a draft pick, because there's so many needs on this team. Do they just decide that we're going to totally focus on giving Mendoza as many weapons as they possibly can? The wide receiver is a glaring need. But then defense in the secondary last year was diabolical. It's a tough job there. But I do agree with Ciaran. Like, you look at, there's a kind of a narrative in free agency. They've done all these deals and because they assume Max Crosby's out the door. Well, they had so much cap space. They were always going to go very heavy in terms of bringing in players because there's so many needs for the team. I do think Crosby will probably inevitably end up playing there. It's right. It kind of feels to me like it's a trade deadline type of move next year where they do get a first round pick because he comes back and proves he's still the player he is. But they are going to have to put other players around them. The second round, the fourth pick, it's interesting. Ciaran Taylor said Boston, the wide receiver, Denzel, Boston, Washington. He strikes. I thought he's like back end the first round, second round wide receiver. He tells me he's the kind of player that could go there. He looks like a real kind of standout player that could help support him. But then it's up front, isn't it? And Kieran's like we speak about time and time again. A quarterback can only do so much. If the offensive line is a shambles, he's going nowhere. He's going to have a very rough outing, shall we say, initially. But if they can secure some players in the draft to allow him to flourish, maybe we will see a bounce back Raiders team. I think it would be. I think we'd all enjoy to see a different Raiders team for a change instead of the losing record in which you see in time and time again. But there's just so many holes there. It's difficult to say, really point out one particular position, Conor, but they do have an abundance of picks. So maybe they strike a right in maybe 50% of the picks and we'll see an immediate contribution, but they certainly won't be challenging to win this division. It's too big a stretch right now.
And Shane, to that point, we talk about this often enough. You build your team first and foremost to compete within your division. And that's not just about, as I've been saying, keeping Fernando Mendoza upright. That's an important part of the equation. For Clint Kubiak's offense to succeed in the way his previous offense succeeded in winning the Super Bowl, he doesn't have a Jackson Smith and Jigba. Yes, he's got Brock Bowers, and yes, he's got Ashton Genty, and those players hold out a huge promise, but he doesn't have that JSN. And defensively, like, they've got some of the league's most high-powered offenses to contend with when Fernando Mendoza is not on the field, or Kirk Cousins, as the case may be.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of work to be done in Vegas, and they're not looking for this year as being the sort of silver and black bullet to try and get them back contending for the division. What I'm more worried about is just the strategy. I mean, we talk about copycat teams, copycat league. The Raiders for the last at least 5 or 6 years have been the copycattiest. That's not even a word, but I'm gonna patent it now. Team in the league in terms of. Pete Carroll was there, so they're trying to build Seattle in the desert. Beforehand, it was Josh McDaniels. They're trying to build New England in the desert, and Tom Brady's there, and they're trying to build whatever. I don't know what it is. They haven't felt like the Raiders since Gruden was in charge.
And Tom Brady cloned his own dog, so he's getting with the program as well, right?
Yeah.
That literally happened, people. Look it up.
Yeah. Yeah, people could Google that at the end of the episode. But it just in terms of like, so what are they going to do then with Mendoza? Are they going to try and give him his Will Campbell in the second round and go for, I don't know, like Caleb Lomu on offensive line if he's still available then, and try to build out that way? We have to remember, as much as we're talking about skill position and defense, and yes, they spent on offensive line. The O-line was so bad last year. I mentioned the fact that Ashton Genty got tackled so many times behind the line of scrimmage. It was ridiculous. Geno Smith, as indecisive as he wasn't given time. And whether it's Kirk Cousins or Mendoza playing in the first half of the season, we don't know. Are they gonna? Is Mendoza starting week 1 here? What way is that going to work? Probably going to change as well. Whether they're going to be as aggressive on the skill positions or just try to get those bread and butter guys early on. It'd just be very interesting. Look, they spent a lot in free agency. I think they need to prepare for Max Crosby being outside of the building in this draft in terms of getting a replacement there, almost planning as if that trade had happened in terms of the draft. I know the money is a different issue, which was the case there. But yeah, it just be, look, there's a lot of work here. I'll just be very interested to see what happens. And on a side note, I am looking forward to all the content for both Mendoza and Kirk Cousins, the two sort of most clean cut, innocent guys, both having to share a quarterback room in Sin City. that should be good crack to sort of see how they get on with that. But yeah, look, I think offensive line. It's not in
that is the worst pitch for a Netflix special I've heard in a long time. Like, I'm jacking in my subscription on that. No thanks.
Oh, like Kirk Cousins was good crack in the last when he was on Netflix the last time, and maybe
was he though?
If there was enough Coles cash, put forward, maybe people would tune in. But yeah, I don't know. Look,
he'll probably like the spear now. I'd say he'd like the spear when he gets over there now.
He'll love it. He loved Varsity Burger. He'll love In-N-Out. That's just follow him going In-N-Out Burger. That's all you need to see.
I love that. Pretty much.